Thanks everybody else for being here. Appreciate everyone being here and tuning in virtually, maybe as we're winding down on Thursday. Again, I'm Evan Shields. I'm a recent graduate from Montana State University. Today, I'm hoping to present a little bit of work. I'm currently working on a manuscript based on my thesis research. That's what I'd like to present today. Before I get going, though, I do want to thank a few folks, a few individuals and organizations. First, I need to thank Yellowstone Forever, Bill Long and the Wyoming Wetland Society, the Ricketts Conservation Foundation, and Margaret Smith and the Trumpeter Swan Society, all for helping to fund this research. I'd also like to thank Doug Smith and the many folks from the National Park Service, especially in Yellowstone, that were very willing to help out in any way that they could. And lastly, I got to thank my graduate advisor, Jay Rotella, and committee members, Bob Garrett and Lauren Walker. Okay, so given the time constraints today, I'm pretty much done away entirely with the introduction and background, but it seems like we've probably covered that pretty well in the preceding days. So really just going to focus on some methods and results. So I'll jump right into it here. This is a look at what Yellowstone National Park in particular did through the years. In the park, aerial surveys are conducted in the fall of each year. And during those, the number of white birds and cygnets are recorded, which allows for the distinction between white birds that are about 16 months of age and have their totally white plumage, and cygnets that were produced during the current breeding season. So total swan abundance, see if I can do this, ranges from a maximum of 87 total trumpeter swans observed during the fall survey in 1954 down to just 2 observed during that survey in 2010. Given the amount of time that's passed since trumpeter swans did actually begin to decline, there's plenty of hypotheses as to why that might have happened. There's plenty that I'm not going to mention here, but the 4 main ones that I focused on were human disturbance, climate and weather conditions and how they might have impacted habitat quality, management and movement of trumpeter swans, in the broader geographic area around the park, and predation. So, given all these hypotheses, the first thing I really wanted to do was to just explore what covariate data sets actually existed and could potentially be used to address all the different hypotheses. Second, I wanted to use the covariates to incorporate them into statistical models in order to evaluate their ability to explain variation seen in the SWAN data. And lastly, I'd hope to present the findings of this in the context of providing additional insight to park managers to hopefully better understand SWAN dynamics and potentially how their ongoing restoration efforts might fit into that picture. So in the end, I ended up collecting 17 different covariate data sets to incorporate into the models, and at least one data set addressed each of the 4 main hypotheses I mentioned there. So looking back at that aerial survey data, I spent quite a bit of time in the archives in Gardner, dug through all the old records, found the originals. I found that trumpeter swans utilized 194 unique locations within the park. This was a little unwieldy, so I pared it down to 50 complexes, geographic groupings really, where they were sited in the park. I will mention, I'm just going to use the word territory here to refer to these locations where they were seen, really just shorthand for those lakes or wetlands. Not necessarily to denote territorial behavior. So the next thing I did after that was to develop a 3-level categorical variable, which described the status of all these different SWAN territories in each year of the study. So the plot here shows the count of territories along the left-hand side, the y-axis, with a potential maximum of 50, and along the x-axis of each pane is the year. So an absent territory is one that would refer to one where no trumpeter swans were observed during the survey, as you could probably have guessed. Present refers to territories where at least one adult swan was seen, one white bird, but no cygnets. So really present in this context actually refers to territories where swans were present but unsuccessful in fledging cygnets. And this was just done to keep the three levels mutually exclusive and avoid overlap. Lastly, successful refers to territories where at least one trumpeter swan cygnet was seen during the survey. So with those three levels of territory status, the next thing that I wanted to do was create two binary response variables of absent versus present territories and present versus successful territories. Today, I'm just going to focus on some results from absent versus present, just for time constraints. But the general layout, I felt, would allow me to explore whether covariates had a different impact on determining whether a trumpeter swan had no swans, non-breeding swans, or swans that were actually successful in fledging young. In addition, I evaluated it over two different time periods. I thought there could be some potential differences in the importance of these covariates depending on the time period. The earlier time period from 1931 to 1959 is actually a time where trumpeter swans were increasing in the park. And I wanted to contrast this with the later time period from 1960 to 2011, which actually includes that decline, but was cut off before restoration efforts began in 2012. So the general idea was evaluate which of these covariates were useful in determining whether territories had swans absent versus present or present versus successful for these two different time periods. And conceptually, we use generalized linear regression models to do this. And in a Bayesian framework, we employed some methods called reversible jump Markov chain Monte Carlo. So I'll just highlight a few portions of this and walk through how it's working. So like other forms of regression modeling, each model does include an intercept term. We also wanted to include random effects for both territories and for years. Just due to the park's survey methods, we felt that there could potentially be a lack of independence between some of those observations, and we did want to account for that. And the random effects just allow that intercept term to be adjusted accordingly for specific territories and specific years. The models also include a bunch of different covariates, which I just can't seem to stop talking about. But these were things like the number of park visitors, temperature, precipitation, drought indices, ice conditions, the number of bears or wolves in the park, and broader trumpeter swan trends outside the park, like the number of trumpeter swans in the tri-state region or at Red Rock Lakes in particular. So the thing that was unique about the reversible jump method was that the covariates are allowed to be included in the model structure or not. There's not a set number that have to be in it. The idea is that it is flexible, different covariate combinations are tried, and the model's predictive ability is evaluated essentially continuously. And based on the performance of past iterations of the model, covariates will be included or left out of the model structure. So in the end, you can look at the total number of times that a given covariate was included in the model structure, compare that to the possible number of times that it could have been included to give you the proportion of times that a covariate was selected to be included in the structure of the model. I will also say that coefficient estimates are also being made for all these. I didn't want to throw them up here because it's already a lot of text, but that is taking place simultaneously as the models are being run. All right, so some model results finally. So if we're looking at 1931 to 1959, and we're looking for covariates that were important in determining whether trumpeter swans were present on territories as opposed to not having any swans at all, we found that both the abundance of Red Rock Lakes trumpeter swans and tri-state trumpeter swans were both important and were included in about 99% of our models. So these were both very important covariates to include. So we can look at a prediction plot here for Red Rock Lakes in particular. I will say that the interpretation would be about the same for tri-state swan abundance, but along the x-axis, we have the predicted probability of swans being present, and along the x, we have the total abundance of Red Rock Lakes trumpeter swans. So we can see that as the number of trumpeter swans at Red Rock Lakes increases from less than 50 up to over 350, the probability of trumpeter swans being present at territories in the park can increase by about 20%. Now, if we shift gears and look at 1960 to 2011, the time during which trumpeter swans were actually declining in the park, we had a few different covariates that came out as being important to include, and this included grizzly bear abundance and total park visitor numbers, which were selected in about 80 and 60% of our model iterations, respectively. It's also worth noting that wolf abundance was included about 40% of the time, and no longer were Red Rock Lakes trumpeter swan abundance or tri-state region swan abundance found to be important anymore, and were included in very few of the model iterations. So we can look at a prediction plot for park visitation, just as an example. The predicted probability of swans being present is again on the y-axis. The green band, as in the previous one, is representing a 90% credible interval. And we can see that as the number of park visitors increased from about 1.5 million up to over 3.5 million, the probability of swans being present in the park decreased by about 20%. One quick caveat before we jump into looking at some of the random effects of the models. So while the number of trumpeter swans in the park trended very strongly through time, so too did a number of the covariates that were used in the analysis. It was something of an unavoidable reality when it came to looking for covariate data sets that reached back into the 1960s or even the 1930s. The end result was that some stronger inferences were prevented from being made with regard to human disturbance and predation hypotheses, just because the covariates used to quantify them trended strongly through time, and were correlated with other data sets. This is a look at random effect of territory. So these random effects can really be seen as an indication of which territories within the park were the best. And in the case of this particular model suite, which territories were most likely to have trumpeter swans present as opposed to absent. So the text along the left side I know is too small to really read. That's all the different territories listed there, but for our purposes, what I'd really just like to point out is that there is quite a big discrepancy between these territories. The red vertical line would represent an average territory. So there are quite a lot of territories that are below average. There are a handful that are above average, and really just a small group that are exceptional. So some of the best territories, up here, some of the best ones there can actually increase the probability of swans being present by as much as 75% or more. So takeaway there, knowing the specific lake or wetland that you're talking about is very important. In comparison, the random effects of year, which is shown here, were quite small comparatively and affected the probability of trumpeter swans being present by 5% or less. So quite a bit smaller than those random effects of territory. And this is a pattern that held across all of the models that we ran, where the random effects of territory were much, much larger than those for years. And they're actually larger than those that were included for any of the covariates that we included. So one other thing to consider with the random effects are that they can also represent latent or unobserved variation, possibly as a result of unmeasured covariates. So while I was able to include a lot of information on temperature and precipitation or ice conditions or drought, things that all the swans within a given year would similarly experience, information for territory specific sort of covariates was much more difficult to come by. So with those random effects of territories being so much larger than those for years, it could really just suggest that that type of territory information is somewhat lacking in the park at the moment. So just a few quick conclusions to wrap up here. From that investigation from 1931 to 1959, we did find that broader population trends outside of the park impacted the probability that trumpeter swans would be present at territories within the park. And although we did find some support for the predation and human disturbance hypotheses, the covariates that were used in order to quantify those hypotheses were strongly correlated with the trend through time, and in the end prevented stronger inferences from being made. And we learned, or really quantified something that trumpeter swan researchers in the park had known for some time, that there are a handful of specific territories within the park that make a very, very big difference and tend to do very well relative to others. Formalized here, those rankings of territories that are more likely to have trumpeter swans present and or successful could be a helpful management tool. So with that, I can answer any questions if I have time. If not, I'll throw my email up there. Feel free to shoot me an email. Happy to get back to you, or we can just chat for the remainder of the conference. So, thanks, everybody.